Today I've decided to do something a little different for this channel and do my first tier ranking video. Today what I'm going to be doing is ranking the bosses of Another Crab's Treasure. Now, I'm not doing this solely based on one thing like difficulty of the boss or the rewards you get for the boss. What I'm doing is just sort of ranking them based on the bosses that I personally enjoyed the most. So if it was a boss that I just didn't really like or don't look forward to fighting again, it's probably going to be a lot lower on this list than others that I did enjoy and look forward to fighting every time I do a playthrough of this game. Now, of course, your opinion is going to be different from mine, most likely. So things may be in a different order than what you would put them in. These, again, just represent my thoughts and my opinions on these bosses from the game. So we'll just go through this list kind of in order of boss appearance. And we'll start here with Nephro, Captain of the Guard. This is kind of a tough one. I'm going to put him at a B, I think. And that's because you fight him right after you get your first shell. But I do think like the on-screen prompts do a good job of sort of acting like a tutorial for you. Like when you pick up the shell, it tells you how to block. So I know people are kind of don't like the boss because they didn't really get experience using the shell before him. But I think the game does enough to teach you, and he sort of is the uh, the point in the game at which you learn how to use the shell. So don't be ashamed or anything if you die to him multiple times because he is there to teach you how to use that shell and how to attack and kind of go back and forth between attacking and blocking. So he's really there to teach you, and he's honestly not a bad boss. So I'm going to put him at B tier. Okay, the next boss is going to be, I believe it's the Polluted Platoon Pathfinder. I'm gonna put him at a C. Uh, there's a couple more. I'm gonna go ahead and skip it. I'm gonna do those real quick. There are a couple of other bosses that are very similar to this one. The next one is the steamroller guy from that's over in Flotsam Vale, and then there's the uh, curdled carbonara connoisseur. These are kind of like different versions of the same boss, basically. They're different, but they're still very similar. They're not bad enemies. They're just not enemies that once I do recommend you go through if it's your first playthrough and you fight all of the bosses, even some of the optional ones. This first guy here is not optional, but these two are. So you should really hunt them down and fight them at least once. Just for me, they're not enemies that I really look forward to fighting again for any particular reason. They're just kind of like one and done enemies, you know? These guys aren't what's going to bring me back to play this game more, is what I'm saying. So we're going to put those all in C tier. And then we get over here, and what do we got? We got Magista, Tyrant of Slacktide. I'm going to put Magista up in S tier. That is a fantastic boss fight. This is when starting a new run. The what does it take? Probably takes me maybe I can get to her maybe in like half an hour, and it's absolutely worth it. It's a fantastic boss fight. It's very well done. I love this one. I'm gonna put that in S tier. The guy with the that's basically the he's basically like the Elden Ring tree sentinel. Is This is like one of the first enemies you can come across in the game when you're really not supposed to fight him. Although you can beat him pretty easily, right out the gate. But if you're more experienced with Souls likes and Souls games, but He, like a lot of enemies, does have, or a lot of bosses, does have a grab attack that can definitely be a one shot, where he'll basically use that guillotine he's carrying around on you. He's not really a bad boss fight. It's just it's cool to do it once, and then you'll probably run past him on every additional playthrough. Uh, I don't think it's bad enough to be D or F, but it's probably just a C for me on this guy. We've got the what is it? The diseased lycanthrope. Uh, I'm gonna put him in D, and I'll tell you why. Again, it's not because it's a bad fight. It's just not a memorable fight. It's not something I look forward to. In my second playthrough, I got to him and I had no memory of fighting him in my first playthrough at all. Like I had completely forgotten this guy. So that's why we're gonna put him in D tier. Okay, so who have we got next? This looks like Hykeia. It's either S or A. It's either S or A. I'm going to put him in S because, again, I really enjoyed the fight. It was basically the first wall that I hit in this game, but every time fighting him, like, it never got frustrating. It was always a fun experience. I look forward to fighting him in future runs of the game. It was just all around a good time. We've got Inkerton. I guess I'll go ahead and do him now. I'm basing this off of not the little encounter you have with him in Flotsam, but I'm going to base it off of the final encounter you have with him in the late game. And it's another tough choice. I'm going to put him in A. Um, a lot of people really, really love this fight. I just kind of thought it was okay. If you ask me, it may be just a little too easy. Um, so that's what kind of drops the enjoyability of it for me, because it's a fight that I think should be much more difficult than it is, and it's a fantastic character. So I'm going to put him in A. It took me a moment to actually remember who this was. I think this is supposed to be the Ceviche sisters. I'm going to put them in F. When you're in Flotsam Vale, you encounter these enemies that make a very um, they'll make various like cowboy noises, like they'll yell like "yeehaw," and it's a very masculine voice. The CPJ sisters use the same sound effects, so there's really nothing to imply that they are in fact sisters. Uh, and there's really nothing that unique about them. They use the same attacks as the enemies you've encountered in the field that were way easier. They just seem to have a larger HP pool. So they get an F just because like it was probably the least original boss fight in this game. All right, next up is Pagurus the Ravenous. And I'm putting Pagurus in S tier. I love the Pagurus fight because it's a fight that is required at a certain point in the story, but you don't have to wait till then. You can fight him before that. You know, the first time you get to the sands between, you can fight him, and you can do it multiple ways. Like you can just learn his move set, dodge him, or parry his attacks that are parryable, and just do damage to him until you defeat him. There's cheese tactics like the one that I have a video on this channel where I just use two bananas. I don't ever actually attack him. I just get him to eat the bananas, and that does enough damage to win the fight. There's just so many different ways you can approach Pagurus as a boss, and you can kind of choose when you do it as well. within the story. So I love this boss. It's definitely one of my favorites. So it's going to be S tier for me. Then we've got Voltai the Accumulator. I would put this at F tier, but I'm gonna put it up to D for this. And the only reason I'm boosting it up a level is because of the most recent patch that nerfed the rubber band stowaway. Just nerfed it just a little bit. Because before, one of her attacks where she uses a hair dryer that shoots like electricity balls at you, you could just stand there and it wouldn't do any damage if you had the rubber band equipped. And you could, you know, do damage to the to Voltai without any real risk to yourself. And it was just really too cheesy, and that has been nerfed. So you now, even with the rubber band, will take some damage. So it's a little bit better of a fight, but again, it's a pretty forgettable one. It just seems like they had to like insert boss fight here. You know, like they knew there should be a boss fight. What should it be? How about this? Um, there just doesn't really seem to be a whole lot of love uh, for this boss in the game. So to me, it's another one that's not quite as forgettable as something like the Lycanthrope or um, the Ceviche Sisters. But I'm going to put it on the same level as the Lycanthrope because the Ceviche Sisters was it was really a terrible, terrible experience. Um, and at least these two fights did seem to have some sort of amount of originality to them, whereas this was just like recycle enemies from the game and call it a boss, you know? All right, who we got next? Roland. I'm going to put Roland at S tier. You fight him on the pinball barge, the pin barge, and he's definitely, I think, a skill check in the game. But it's a really fun one. I enjoyed this. This boss probably made me learn at that point more than any other boss how to block and parry. And it also really taught me the value of the adaptations, which I think up to that point I wasn't really focusing on using a lot, but I saw a lot of advantage to the adaptations during the Roland fight. Okay, next up we've got the False Moon, Petrock the False Moon. Uh, I'm gonna put it in C tier. Uh, I'm gonna bump it up to B. I'm gonna bump it up to B, and I'll tell you why I'm gonna bump it up to B because it's effectively a mimic bonfire, and just that whole concept. I don't think I've seen that done before. And I say bonfire, so you know it's a moonshell snail where you save your game, but that's if you've played a Souls game before, it's a bonfire. And the idea of having a fake bonfire that becomes an enemy that fights you is is like really good, and I think should actually be maybe explored by someone like From Software because that's too good of an idea. So the idea of this one alone, more than the actual boss or the fight, for me puts it in B tier. Okay, next up is Topada, the mantis shrimp. It's another B tier for me. To me, it wasn't the most amazing fight in the game. It wasn't like it was okay. It was okay, you know. I like what you get from him more than the actual boss fight itself, and because you get the Manus Punch adaptation from him, and also the ability to upgrade your adaptations. So winning this fight, I think, is very important to the game. But the fight itself is just kind of lackluster. The consortium. I'm going to put the consortium in C. And the reason for that is because it's a large boss, and the it's definitely doable. You can, I mean, it's a boss, it's a beatable boss, but there's a lot that works against you in this game. It has a couple of one-shot moves. It has a gun it shoots that has, I would say, almost too large of an area of effect. I don't think I've been able to successfully run or dodge the blast from the gun. Uh, I usually just have to like use the shell to keep from getting one shot. Granted, I do tend to play this game at fairly low vitality, so a lot of things in this game one shot me. But yeah, the gun does seem to one shot me. And just getting away from it without taking any damage at all. The area for that just seems a little too large. The camera can also be wonky with this boss, and it can make it hard because one of its one shot attacks is the cage will basically drop down onto you, but you need to be near it to hit the targets on it. And sometimes it'll move around and the camera will whip around and like you can't really even tell where you are, and you'll be underneath it and within range of that hitbox, and then you'll just get one shot. It's kind of annoying, but it's a cool boss in concept. It really is. And you get a really great adaptation from it, which is the Tactical Tentacle, which is one of my favorite adaptations for the game because as you attack, the tentacle will also attack, and you're both building up stagger. And it also, I think you have to level it up first, but it reaches a point where it also heals you as it attacks. So you sort of get an extra layer of like a Bloodborne effect going on where you're getting health back as you are aggressive and attacking with the tentacle. Um, as far as adaptations go, I would say the tentacle and Manus Punch are probably now the only ones I level up, really. Um, Everybody's playstyle is different, but I can basically make it through the game with those two adaptations at like level 3. Moving on, we've got Kamcha. Kamcha is going to be an S tier for me. Not for the first phase of the fight. I find the first phase to be kind of boring, and it's just yeah, the first phase is just really boring, right? But phase two is just fantastic. I love it. Um, it's very challenging, I think, or it's at least the right amount of challenging for a boss fight for that late into the game. So yeah, I think it's pretty well done. So I'm going to put Kamcha the Reborn here at S tier. Uh, but not all late game bosses are created equal because next up we've got Praedubia, and man, I am it's gonna be down here somewhere. Is it D or is it F? Is it D or is it F? I think it's F. I think it's F. Why do I think it's F? It's just not story wise. It's great. It makes sense in the narrative. It's a very interesting boss, right? But it's just tedious to a point of just being almost unenjoyable. Now, in the base game and previous patch versions, it was a lot better because it had very little HP. I think it had like 3,000 HP. You do its little gimmick of fighting some crabs, and then it comes down, and then you fight it, and you can pretty much one cycle it. It was great. It was I think an unenjoyable boss fight that was made enjoyable due to the brevity of it. It was just over with very quickly. And then you enter phase two, and phase two is just dodging attacks. Like you don't have to attack the boss, it takes damage over time, but you've just got to stay alive. And it's really and it basically just repeats some attacks. Some like laser attacks are the worst ones. And once you've dodged that once or twice, um, phase two is just also kind of boring. It's not as exciting as like, oh, stay alive until the end. It's not as exciting. There's not really as much randomness to it as you'd want there to be. It still attacks in patterns, and once you have that pattern, it's just almost like it's wasting your time at that point. Uh, but it was at least enjoyable because that first phase you could get through really quickly. Um, but now they buffed it. They upped its HP from 3,000 to 7,000 in the latest patch. Uh, the first phase takes multiple cycles of doing the same thing. And I may have said in another video that it really reminds me of like phase one Renala in Elden Ring, except when you fight like Renala at a really low level and you're just barely doing any damage to her and you have to, hit the singing kids and get her to drop down and hit her a few times, then she goes back up and you've got to do that for like 2 or 3 cycles. It's just not fun. It's just work at that point. Like, you know how to do it. It's not hard. There's really no challenge in it. It's just, it takes too much time. And that's how I feel about Cryodubia. This fight now is it's just not difficult, but very tedious. And for me, that's just not fun at all. And finally, the last fight of the game, Firth, the crab who stole the whirl. Ah, I'm not going to rank this one super high. I, I really didn't like this fight that much. It's again, it's a fight that I'm like, I guess it's fine. It actually, compared to some of the other bosses, it feels like almost like too much of a, or it can feel like too much of a spike in difficulty. Like again, it's really, by the time you get to the end of the game, it's really not that hard of a fight. It just, uh, I'm gonna put him in D, honestly, because I really feel like so much of that fight is just absolute bullshit. Um, he spends so much time in phase one just ducking inside the shell, which he can parry you. So if you go to like hit him and he decides to duck into the shell, expect that you're gonna take damage. Uh, he has some attacks that come out just almost ungodly fast. Like I don't know whose reflexes were intended to like completely block or parry everything he does, but like you're gonna take hits. Um, so again, he's still very doable at that stage in the game. It just feels like it. Something about his fight feels to me more like a difficulty spike above all the other bosses, which I know it's the final boss in the game, but it's still, it's, I don't know, something about the first fight that I just don't look forward to. When you look up here at S tier, these are the fights that when I replay this game, I actually look forward to spending time fighting these bosses. And it's not a very long list, unfortunately. One, two, three, four, five bosses that like really do the trick for me. This guy would be up there. Ingerton would be up there if I think he were actually a little more difficult. I feel like you can kind of beat him quicker than you should. He should be a much stronger character, at least as to what the rest of the narrative implies about him. These guys are just fine. These are, when we get down to C tier, we're looking at these guys are all like, I recommend you do them, but if you're doing playthroughs again of the game, if it's not your first playthrough and you wanted to skip most of these, I wouldn't blame you. Um, these to me, like I said, this first guy, the lycanthrope, was just 100% forgettable. I honestly, between my first and second playthrough, and I gotta remind you, there wasn't even a week, I don't think, between my playthroughs, just like a couple of days, and I completely have no memory of fighting him in my first playthrough. but you have to. He's required. I definitely fought him. I cannot remember fighting him the first playthrough of this game. That's how forgettable this guy is. Voltaire the Accumulator is just, it's a mad boss, right? And yeah, I know people are going to disagree with me. I want Firth to be like S tier or at least A tier. And on your list, maybe that's where you've got him. But I just, I don't know. I don't love the Firth fight. And then down here in F tier, the Ceviche sisters. It's this is absolutely in the correct order here because this Ceviche sisters are, in my opinion, the worst boss in the game. Like it was almost like the most phoned in boss. Like I just no. That's all I can say about it. Is just it's a terrible boss. And then Praia Dubia, which would have been higher in the list based off of uh, its stats from the base game, but on the latest patch, it's just F. It's just too much of something that's just not that interesting. Um, the fight just goes on for too long, and then its second phase just really isn't as exciting as you would want that kind of survival tactic to be. So yeah, I'm putting both of those in F tier. Yep. So S tier, we've got Magista, Hakia, Pagaris, Roland, and Kamsha. So this is what my list looks like. Feel free to share with me down below any list you've created for the bosses in Another Crab's Treasure. And, I'd like to see what you think and where you think these bosses should be ranked. Again, this is just my personal opinion. And I hope you enjoyed this, and I will catch you on the next one.